in your content so that people know that you're not just one success after another, but you want to share your failures and the way you overcome them, because that inspires people to continue to follow in your footsteps, which is the sort of attitude you want them to have if you want them to keep opening your emails regardless of what the subject line is. And finally, you want to be authoritative when cultivating a perception of celebrity. And by that, I mean when you talk about the things that you're supposed to be an expert in, have a definitive opinion. Even if you end up being wrong, and again, that's another way you can build up credibility, is by leaving yourself open to be persuaded. But when you do speak with a solid opinion, and try to only have an opinion if it's based on experience, because that's what people value in an expert. And when you frame it that way, when you make sure you only add to a conversation when you have some sort of experience or expertise, it makes it so that if you're ever challenged, you can defend it, and that gives you a position of authority, which again feeds into the other two aspects, being aspirational and inspirational. So that's the celebrity side of the from line. But the other side of that coin is familiarity, which is, I think, a unique balance that internet marketing gurus, not just in internet marketing as a niche, but any sort of figure that's trying to build an audience, a personalized audience, using the internet needs both of these. Celebrity by itself will work for a movie star that has access to the mass media, but if you're trying to run that media yourself, you need both celebrity and familiarity. And one of the things in this context that familiarity will help you do if you talk to people directly in your email as if you have a one-to-one relationship with them and you give them a lot of value, you trigger reciprocity and a feeling of indebtedness from that audience, believe it or not, and that will make them want to open your emails, or at the very least, not delete them or think they're spam, because you've given them so much. They're indebted to you, so they're more keen to respond to your messages in case you're asking them to do you a favor, in which case it would relieve them of that feeling of reciprocity. Also, when you combine this authority with that familiarity, you can create in your audience a desire that they want to avoid disappointing you. So if you tell them something's cool and they should check it out, and they do check it out and it is cool and they don't end up buying it, sometimes they'll actually come to you and apologize for not buying it. Even though, maybe they truly couldn't afford it, but they feel like it's just a peculiar position to put yourself in, because your audience will begin to look up to you for the celebrity factors, but then the familiarity factors sort of trigger familial emotions, things like obligation and, like we said, indebtedness. And then it triggers this avoidance of disappointment where they feel like they owe you their attention. They're obligated. So those are sort of ways and reasons you can sort of set up your from line to be just as important as the subject line, which I think is, generally speaking, a more important factor anyway. Check on the, let's see if anyone had questions. Who owns Google? Stockholders. JC said, say that again, that bit about what you say with experience. I missed when you asked me that, so if you could re-ask it in more detail and give me some context, I'll repeat it. But I don't remember the part you were talking about. Sorry, I'm toggling between my my mind map with my notes and the chat window. So keep that in mind. The opinion thing. Let's see. Let me look at my notes and see if something comes out. No, I don't have either of those words in my notes, so I'm just not connecting it. Oh yeah, okay. So when you have an opinion, have a definitive one that's based on experience. Yeah, you guys were paying attention. That's awesome. My mind maps have like one or two words apiece, and then I just sort of extrapolate on that. So a lot of what I say isn't actually in my notes. So thank you guys for paying such close attention. Yes. Deliver opinions about things that happen in your niche from a solid standpoint. I'm sure you guys might have heard that phrase. Dan Kennedy popularized it. I believe he credited it to Gary Halbert, and I think Gary Halbert credited it to someone else. But the idea of people are walking around with their umbilical cords in their hand looking for a place to plug it in. In other words, people just want someone to tell them what to do. They want someone with wisdom, someone who knows how to live so that they won't make any mistakes, they won't suffer anything, and also they'll achieve a good deal of pleasure. That's sort of what people generally want at a very basic level. So when you present yourself to them and you want to give them the perception that you're an expert, a lot of people make the mistake of, even if they are experts tend to become experts and really understand a subject deeply. They see both sides of it and sort of understand this complicated balance, So like when you ask an expert a question, they'll say, well, that really depends. And then they'll name 10 ways that it depends. But the thing is, that doesn't convince people of your expertise. It seems like you're confused. If you want to give people the perception that you truly are an expert, you want to be definitive. You want to have a singular, easily expressible opinion on the subject, and you want to stand by it. Now, if someone wants to challenge you on it, you don't want to call them an idiot. If they're actually correct, acknowledge it, and that actually makes you stand out more in the eyes of your audience. Now, the way to not look like a jackass frequently when you adopt this strategy is to not deliver an opinion into the public unless it's based on experience of yours. So that way, like I'm sure you'll see this kind of thing on forums, you'll say something, and then someone will argue with you and say, "Oh, well, I don't think that's based on any kind of test. That's not what I heard," And then you can say, "Well, here's the exact context in which I got that opinion based on this experience." Now, maybe my experience is not universal, but I try not to say things without having the experience to back it up. So if I say something, it is based on a thing that happened and a conclusion I made. People value opinions that come more from experience. So if you're asking that as a question, which I assume you are, JC, with the 4 question marks, people do regard experience when they're considering the weight of an opinion. We were talking about, politics in Egypt earlier, and I disqualified myself from speaking about it from an authoritative standpoint because I just catch snippets on the news. Honestly, as I'm flipping channels, shame on me for not keeping up on global events. It's just not my thing. But imagine, a 2-year-old girl from America talking to you about the political situation in Egypt. You would not give that very much gravity because obviously it does not come from a place of experience. Whereas if you were talking to someone who had served, in some sort of volunteer capacity in the Middle East, or, even someone that had a diplomatic position in Egypt, it's not just the label that gives their opinion weight, but it's the perception that label comes with a degree of experience. So if you only present an opinion when you have an experience to back it up, it makes that opinion much more solid and real to people, even if someone challenges you on it. You can present your real experience and people respect you. And even if your mind is changed, even if you end up being proved wrong in public, what it shows people, what it actually demonstrates about you is that when you say something, it's not just repeating some knee-jerk piece of information you got from somewhere else. It shows that there's a whole context with you and your information. So hopefully I explained that whole bit better. And if we're good, we'll jump ahead to the next topic. Thank you, JC. JC said, well explained. So I'm going to take that as a yes. I explained that particular bit. So subject lines, when people ask what is a good one, or they look at subject lines that were particularly successful, what those numbers actually mean is not anything to do with the value of that subject line, because you have to remember the context in which people read their email. They're not looking at one email subject line at a time and deciding yes or no, I'm going to open this and read it right now. They're usually looking at a list of, if they're anything like me, hundreds of emails come in a day because I'm on a ton of lists. And what you want to do with a good subject line, beyond making the from field matter, because that's what will catch their eye and make them want to read the subject. Otherwise, they might just ignore it altogether. So once you've made the from line matter and they want to look at emails from you, the subject line that gets their attention has to do with breaking the pattern, by which I mean their inbox is going to have a pattern of subject lines, and you want something that's going to stand out from that. So part of that has to do with knowing what their inbox looks like, which is why I happen to be on hundreds of lists, sometimes multiple times. That's a little tip, too. If you like to do testing research to see what other marketers test, every time you sign up for their list, use a different email address and have it all sent to the same place, because then you can sometimes see the different split tests that they run. But anyway, back to what I was saying. You're a member of a lot of lists in your niche because you want to know potentially what that target customer's inbox looks like. What are other people talking to them about? What is it they're getting bored of, because that's what everyone else is saying. So you want to look for the commonalities in their field of view, in their range of experience, and then reverse them so that you stand out. It's one of those truisms of marketing that look at what everyone else is doing and do the opposite. That's actually a really poor phrasing of that advice, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to do the opposite just because. It's a truism because what that phrase is really about is look for the pattern. Look at what everyone else has in common and somehow flip that so it's a negative. So everyone else blurs together around that, and then you stand out as the opposite. And this holds true for subject lines. You want to know what the pattern looks like so you can break it. So one of the famous headlines that, subject lines for an email that I wrote that had a huge impact, that even sort of got talked about because we told people it worked so well, and then people repeated that story. The subject line was just bad news. That's it. That's all the subject line was. Now, that's not to say that subject line will work great for everybody, although it did work great for a lot of people who repeated it. But the people who it worked great for are the kind of people that develop this sort of celebrity and familiarity relationship that I'm talking about. Some total stranger says, bad news, you don't care. But someone you know and whose opinion matters to you says, bad news, that's a curiosity factor. That really is going to pluck at your little brain strings and make you jump to go see what that guy is going to say. That's sort of that's the second major factor I see in writing subject lines, besides making the from matter. I'm going to go check the chat window again, make sure I didn't miss any questions like last time. Yeah, exactly. When Kern used it, Kern used that, hey, use the subject line, bad news. I think we had actually used that as a promotion for his thing, or we had floated the idea that it was an awesome subject line to test. I forget, but we actually did use that originally as a subject line, and we got a huge response on it. But again, it's very much about the context, and it's very much about what your list is expecting and what else they see. So when you're trying to craft a subject line, instead of focusing on like, do I have enough power words? Is it passive or active? Instead of thinking of that, try and take a look at what else it is they're being bombarded with, so you can truly be a unique voice that stands out, as opposed to being something that just blends in with everyone else. If everyone else is yelling, hanging back and whispering is more effective than trying to yell even louder, is basically what I'm trying to say. Once again, Sweetwater 420 truly hits the spot. All right. So the final factor, and we sort of talked about this a little before, with subject lines being given the benefit of the doubt to be open, whether they're super awesome or not, is what is the prospect's relationship to you? And we talked about how you want to cultivate a bit of celebrity and a bit of familiarity. One of the ways that we can facilitate that is to use email as the medium it was intended for, which is to say it was originally intended as a one-to-one communication channel. Email is from one person to one person almost every time, and at least that's the ones we tend to read with the most interest. It's sort of like when the marketing pioneers originally decided to mail sales letters through the postal mail originally. The reason that worked so well is because at the time, the only mail people got was from friends and family. So it's sort of like jamming yourself into a friendly conversation to talk about business, which proved somewhat effective because they read it in the context of it being from family and friends. So in email, you want to support that. I usually recommend that you don't want your emails to be the same as a blog post, to where you say, hey, everybody. You don't have to use mail merges where you actually integrate their name, because that's sort of, trite and cheesy, especially when people are like me and they type dirty words into the name form to make themselves giggle when they read your email. But write your emails as if they are from you specifically to one specific person, and they'll read a lot better and be a lot more impactful. And it's sort of, in a strange way, will serve to be a reward for the subject line capturing their attention. When people say, pay attention, there's a reason that verb is used, and it's because it takes effort. When you require attention of us, we are giving you something that takes effort, like we're paying. Attention is a payment. So when someone gives you their attention, even if you were sneaky in tricking them into giving it to you, always reward it. And this is one of the ways that you can do that, is by, essentially you've made the from line matter, and you're saying, hey, pay attention to me. And when they look at you, you're talking to them directly. It matches that. They don't feel like they were tricked into looking at an advertisement, because, hey, it's a message from this person I actually sort of kind of know of at a distance, kind of. Again, that's basically the way you make the content reinforce what we talked about of making the from line matter, and the from line makes them read the subject line in a positive light, so that when you do put something out there to break the pattern, they're skimming their inbox, they see, oh, here's an email from so-and-so, and ooh, shocking headline. Because that's the order they skim it. They skim it to see who it's from, and then if it's from someone they're interested in, then they read the subject line. So that's sort of the order of importance. And you'll notice very little of that had to do with advice about actually writing subject lines, but hopefully it gives you a lot to think about as to how to construct them to actually matter to people. You want people to open your email, make it worth their while. And that's not necessarily something you can deliver in one email, but you can deliver it over many emails. So you want to keep that relationship going. You want it to snowball, so that every time they open an email from you, they get a little bit more of that stuff we're talking about that we want to give them, that makes them think of us in such a way and feel good about the content we give them, so that next time they're even more likely to open our email. And then by the third time, they're really hoping we'll email them, so that they can open it and have a good time reading it, so on and so forth. All right, let's check in on the chat. do you think sending all emails with the title "From Justin Wheeler" might improve your open rates or make them run to the hills? Assuming, of course, all the content is as awesome as it should be from me. Well, if you have a package and every time someone opens that package they find the prize inside, they're going to start to want to look for that package and get that package and open it repeatedly. And that's sort of the way these personas we create when we put ourselves in the public eye as sort of information deliverers, not just, gurus, but even, bloggers, even, YouTube video reviewers. Anytime we put ourselves out there, we're creating a package for the information. And if we make that part of the product, that package will come to mean something. I've talked before to other people about it in the context of when you go to the grocery store, you can buy the generic fruit-flavored Cheerios in a plain, clear plastic bag for $1, or the kids are probably going to want you to buy the $4 box of Fruit Loops TM with Toucan Sam on it, that animated cartoon toucan with the British accent who sings songs on TV. Now, that's sort of the idea that you want to have behind when you create your own persona and making yourself matter. And it's really up to you whether you want to do that under your own name. It depends on how dedicated you are to your niche. Using pen names are fine. But I really do think, even if you are a huge corporate business, there's a vast, vast benefit in putting a person with a face and a personality out there. And even huge corporations do it. To a large degree, Microsoft still uses Bill Gates as a mascot, even though he doesn't really steer that ship. Google, when interfacing with the SEO world, has Matt Cutts. They're not just, Google. He's sort of their liaison. He's their diplomat. And that's something you want to position yourself as for your own niche. You're the guy who keeps tabs on everything happening all over in the whole world, and you're the person who delivers that to them. So if you keep that attitude and develop that relationship, you will, get more people into your list who want email from Justin Wheeler himself. They're going to start valuing that name. That's not to say some people won't unsubscribe, but if that's what you want, if that's what you're trying to cultivate, the people who aren't interested in that, let them go, because there are plenty more who will be. Hopefully that kind of answered your question. All right. Back into the mind map. All right, so moving on from subject lines, now let's talk about sales headlines, which, again, headlines are another topic where people really fret over it, from the old marketing chestnuts about how, it's the most important part. You can get drastic conversion changes tweaking the headline. And yes, that is true, because it is the first thing that people read. But again, it's all about context. What kind of headlines work are not universal. And when marketers, it's really cool to look at old-fashioned marketing stuff from, way back, the old school direct marketing stuff, and try and apply it to the internet. But one thing that people tend to forget is the context. So when you're talking about a sales letter that's been stuffed in an envelope and stuck in someone's mailbox, they open it, they're going to read the headline first. That is literally the first thing from you that they read, unless you, had something printed on the envelope. When you're talking about online, that's pretty much never going to be the first thing that they read. People don't randomly type words into the URL bar with a .com on the end until they find a website they like. They'll either search, in which case your search listing is the first thing they see, or you're running a pay-per-click ad, in which case that's the first thing they see, or you've sent an email ad to someone else's list, or they've written a blog post and linked back. There's always a context in the headlines for online sales letters, and depending on that context, they're going to be drastically different. So I don't have. It's funny. I was talking to George about this earlier. I don't really keep a swipe file of headlines that I like, that I think, oh, I'm going to copy this headline the way some people do, because what's never included in those swipe files is the context. What magazine did this run in? What position in the magazine was it in? What was on the opposite page? I think all of those are important things to know, because like I said, getting attention is all about knowing the pattern and then breaking it, because that's how our brains work. Way back when we were, still apes living in the trees, our pattern recognition software was about, spotting food, spotting opportunities to reproduce, and spotting, things that wanted to eat us. So, we learned to skim, and something stands out and it catches our attention. It's the same thing now, except, those pieces of software are now, attuned to watching TV, or, checking our iPhones or playing on Facebook, as opposed to, scanning the tree line for tigers. But it's still there. It's still very much a deep part of our brain, and it works the same way. So when you want to write a really effective headline, be as prescient and aware and as conscious of the context that it's going to be presented in. Hopefully, I explained that well and didn't go too over the edge there. Let's see. Yes, Judy. When someone says something like, I did this and got 20% improvement in conversions, depending on what it is, it's really, really, really hard to say that that is a statistic that is in any way going to help other people. It's one thing if you're talking about, like, adding a little trust badge to a checkout process. That's something that can drastically improve conversion almost universally, because it's just a badge. But when you're talking about an actual communication, a piece of communication, it's just, one thing could work for one area and one thing could just totally flop, depending on where the traffic comes from. So here's how I write a headline. I think it's a pretty good formula. And like I said, it's about the context. It's about being aware of where they're going to come from when they're going to see that headline, what previous communications they've had with you or about you. Did they come from a JV who said you were awesome? Did they come from a JV who didn't mention you at all but said your product was awesome? All of those things are factors in how you're going to write a headline. But these are general guidelines that when you know those things, this is how I write them. So it's a 3-part headline that I like to use, and that's a pre-head that's usually in bold in a slightly larger font than the body text on the page. Then there's the, big red headline that's, in the headline font. And then underneath that is what I call a post head, which is usually the same font size as the pre-head, not in bold, in italics, usually ends in an ellipses, and you'll see why in a minute. So pre-head, headline, and post-head, I usually use all 3 every time. Now, sometimes they get edited and whittled down so they don't all 3 make it, but I try and make all 3 as part of the same thought. So the pre-head is where we start, and what I always try to state in the pre-head is the predominant pressing problem that the product intends to solve. And the reason I do that is because we all know pain and suffering are the strongest motivator we have. Either we have pain and we want to get rid of it, or we want to avoid ever experiencing pain. So the first button I always try to press, and that's going to be solved, to pick one randomly from my own niche, tired of auto blogging software that doesn't work. you really just want to cut straight to the point in as few words as possible. This is the problem, so that someone just skimming it and you don't actually know where they come from, they'll say, yes, I have that problem, and that will cause them to read the next part, which is the headline. And if you will give me a moment to check the chat. Let's see. You just wrote Chris Ramsey's WSO headline. I don't believe I did, but he and I do talk. We're in like 4 different masterminds together, and we talk about copy. So I might have had some influence on it. I've talked to Chris about copy before, but I don't recall particularly writing that specific headline. So prehead presents the problem to not say too many P words in a row. Moving on to the headline, I know I just said that it can be a mistake to listen to these like super old marketers from the old school direct mail days, but I'm going to go ahead and reverse that and say Robert Collier, who wrote the Robert Collier letter book, which is like the first book on writing sales letters back when they were actual letters. He said you can't go wrong calling out the ideal prospect in your headline. And I tend to agree with that, especially when you tie it to, you know, hey, buddy, do you suffer from this problem? And then you go ahead and even refine it even further and call out that ideal prospect. You know, you don't even have to be blatant, but all of the really good headlines that people talk about do this, even if it's implied. So I know, like, there's that John Carlton headline about the one-legged golfer. That explicitly appeals to people who play golf because it's implied in the headline that, you know, that I saw this one-legged golfer hit this golf ball, you know, 300 yards or whatever it was. I can't even remember the specifics of it because, again, I don't keep swipe files like that. But that headline addresses specifically the guy who is in the market to buy that golf course. Not a golf course, but, you know, a course about playing golf. You get what I mean. But to me, that's only part of it because, like I was saying before, you aren't just talking to prospects in isolation. What you're trying to cultivate, even in your products, not just in your emails, is this connection to the prospect through which they see you as representing the potential that they have. So one way your past tense, right? Like, I used to be just like you. You hear that a lot in copy. You, the vendor or creator of this particular product, whoever it is the letter is from, you represent their future. Now, in the present moment where they're here reading this letter from you, you overlap, right? Like you're having a conversation person to person and you're connecting on a one-to-one basis, even though you're ahead of where they are and they're behind where you are. So, like, you know, if you know what a Venn diagram is, the 2 circles that each have a thing and then they overlap in the middle, and that's the part they have in common. That's what we're talking about. You are the expert, they are the apprentice, and you're sort of overlapping each other in the middle to just have a talk over, you know, a beer, for example, or, you know, a cup of coffee or whatever. It's sort of supposed to be a casual letter. Like I said, you're trying to support that familiarity so that they don't think it's weird you're mailing them a letter when they don't really know you. You want to foster, I hesitate to call it an illusion, but it's definitely a somewhat false impression because it's not really a one-to-one communication, even though we strive to maintain that illusion. So what we do with that by showing ourselves as the future version of them, you create a way for them to see what's possible. They see the potential that they have to actually solve this problem of theirs. They see it in you. You are the actual proof that it works. Then they can't go back to the past tense version of themselves that didn't know a solution existed. Once you actually convince them to read about how it exists, they have one choice: either continue to live suffering the problem or accept the solution that exists. It's no longer, they can't pretend it's unsolvable anymore. And, that may seem really complicated, but you can do it in just one headline if you make the headline not just calling out them, but calling out you and your specific solution. So another good example of that from a very, very old sales letter that people usually put the headlines in a swipe file is, when I sat down at the piano, they laughed. But when I played, ... So that calls out the ideal candidate, namely a person that would even care that people like the way he played piano. And it creates an immediate connection between the person writing the letter as being awesome at playing piano now and the person reading the letter who is terrible at playing piano now. And now he represents that possibility that you could go from being a laughable piano player to being one that inspires awe in your audience. Like you've shown them that bridge exists to where they want to go. And now it's really, really uncomfortable for them to have to pretend it doesn't exist so they can go back to the way things were. That's a very, very effective way to present an idea to people that they can't escape, and then once they think of it, they can't get it out of their head. Okay. It looks like just dirty jokes in the chat as usual, rather than any sort of serious business discussion, which is fine because I'm having a beer. We're just having a good time. It's business talk. Okay, so headlines. You got the pre-head that presents the problem. You got the headline that is putting forth the big idea, connecting who the prospect is with who you are and how you represent the solution. And then finally we go to the post head, which I always like to throw in. It's funny, I didn't realize this until recently, but the way I use this post head is almost exactly the same way that I use PSs in emails. And that is to expand the scope of what I'm trying to get them to do. In an email, it would be, the PS would be a last-ditch effort to get them to click the link for a totally unrelated reason. My old fallback is, even if you aren't interested in this product, you should still check out the way this guy marketed it because he did a really good job, and you can, add it to your swipe file. So sort of just a last-ditch effort, because if you're reading the PS and you haven't clicked, I just haven't pushed your buttons, but you're not mad at me because you're still reading. So I just try and throw one more thing out there to get you to click over. That's how it works in an email, but in a sales letter, each bit of the sales letter is just bait to get them to read the next part and keep digging deeper until eventually they're convinced and they just want to scroll down to the bottom where the order is. Like the sales letters are a peculiar piece of copy in that it's meant for people to skip large chunks of it once you've convinced them. And you sort of put your best persuasive stuff at the front and then let them get persuaded, and then they skim the proof to say, oh, yeah, I made a good decision already, based on my emotions. This is justified. I'm going to go ahead and buy it. But the point of bringing that up is that the post head is sort of, okay, yes, I do have that problem. Okay, I'm interested. I see that you have actually solved this problem that I specifically have. You're talking to me. And then the post head is just supposed to pull them in and get them to want to read the rest of the letter. So the post head is about, just like in the email, I want to throw out a big additional benefit that expands the scope of the solution. So way back to the hypothetical example I used where we said, are you tired of auto blogging software that just doesn't work? The headline might be, discover the secret combination of WordPress plugins that this stay-at-home dad developed in his free time and now makes a full-time living and supports his family working only 2 hours a day. That would be the headline. It's kind of long. I would work on chopping that down, but I'm just making it up as I go. And then the post head would be, and not only does it fully automate all your blogging procedures, but you can replicate it on as many blogs as you can stand to make. So that suddenly expands the scope and adds an additional big benefit that not only is it auto blogging software that works, but you can use it over and over. It broadens the appeal of what it is we're even talking about. So, to give a totally off-the-wall example, actually, I guess it's not that off-the-wall. The one I thought of would be, toothpaste that also whitens your teeth. It's not why you were brushing your teeth, but hey, that's awesome. Why wouldn't I use that toothpaste as opposed to another one? Because it has a big additional benefit. Now, one of the reasons I like this 1, 2, 3 formula is because I think, 3, as they say, 303 is a magic number. Three just resonates with people, but I even use 3 points when I write bullets, and I sort of ran out of time this week. Maybe I'll talk about it next week. I use 3 points when I write bullets, and I guess it's the same thing with the headline. I want to grab your collar and slap you in the face and then tell you what I want. So it's a step 1, step 2, step 3 process. And to me, as a reader, it feels unnatural when you don't pull my attention along that way. So it's almost like you're waving with the pre-head, and then when the person walks up, the headline is about you saying, hey, yeah, I was talking to you. It's me, this guy, and here's why I think I can help you. And then the post head is you opening up the door and letting him into whatever it is you were hawking them to go into and saying, look, go ahead. It's right over there. And it's better than you ever thought it would be, So it's almost like being a sideshow barker in that particular respect. But I feel like the 1, 2, 3 is a way to capture and refine attention before you even start the letter. Because if someone makes it through those 3 points, they are targeted. So they're the person who's mostly the person who could extract the most benefit from your product anyway. And then additionally, they are pre-primed to look at anything you hand them in a positive light, because you've already said, here's relief from this problem, I'm on your side, and it's even going to do all this other awesomer stuff. Who doesn't want to keep listening to what comes next after that particular setup? So, looks like we got 2 minutes left. I'm going to jump in to make sure nobody else has any questions about my headline writing methods. Let's see. Matt said, we have to get Colin to give us a page example before he signs off. I sort of just made one up on the fly. I don't have a page example up yet, but the problem is I write for launches, and then when the launch is over, all the copy goes away. So I don't have pages living with copy that I've written. But if you see a sales letter from me, which you should soon because I'm finishing up the transcription of a webinar that I just did and polishing it, you'll see that pattern. Here's the problem. Here's the headline that connects us. Here's the additional benefit. Now, again, once you get that out and you start editing and you want to chop it down and make it as simple and concise as possible, it doesn't have to remain, step 1, step 2, step 3. That's sort of just like my first draft. And then a lot of times that's, when you're doing a launch, that's as good as you get. But the piano playing headline that I mentioned, at first they laughed when I sat at the piano, but then they heard me play. That does all 3 compressed down into an even more efficient package. It's not so much the words you use, it's the progression of problem. I'm showing you the potential that I have for solving your problem if you keep reading, and then not only will it solve that problem, it'll whiten your teeth too. Oh, Matt is asking about the secret password for the post on my blog. I'm going to type it into the chat, but I'm not going to say it in the video. If you're watching this video, you have to find me and ask me for this password. I will give it to you, but you have to find me and ask. There you go. That's the password to the password protected post on my blog. Find me and ask. If they want to find and ask for me, Judy, I'm more than happy to accept ask and payment. Okay, I've run over a little. I'm 1 minute over. Let's see if Mike is here. Mike told me he might be running a little late. And I do not see him here. So I'm going to continue on with the usual part where I end my show and I repeat my little rules for recording the show. If you listen to this live, you can record it for personal use. Please try to refine it to the little window where I am actually talking, because the people chatting may not want to be part of your video, and that's not really part of the show. Anyway, if you do record me, you have my permission to freely share it, as long as someone can just type in a URL and go straight there, and you don't force them to opt in or to pay you anything to get a hold of it, because you don't have the permission to do that. But if you want to give the stuff away, all you have to do is make sure you tell people they can listen to new episodes weekly on talkmarketingnow.com, Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. And you can get in touch with me directly at colintheriot.com, spelled C-O-L-I-N, theriot.com. And that's pretty much all I got. Let's see, which post is the secret post? The post on my blog that's the secret post is the only one on the whole blog that will ask you for a password. It's something like how to start your own cult, something like that. Oh, and Bill said my video is up, so I'm going to try and play that again for you guys so you can see my awesome video intro. Hopefully it won't make me crash. That'll kill some time until Mike gets there. Nope, still video is not found. Maybe it's got a new URL. Let me check the chat window. Well, it is very not easy to copy and paste in this chat software. What kind of joint am I running here, John Schwartz? We're past my hour. I'm running Mike Carraway's show now. So, if it goes off the rails, you can just go ahead and blame it on him. I only planned for an hour. Let's see if it works this time. Oh, I'm sorry, Bill. I can't get it to work. I'll try again next week. All right, let's see. Did anyone ever call you Colin the Riot? No, no one ever has. It's funny you mentioned that. I can't believe no one has ever thought of that the entire time I've been alive. I'm sorry, I'm just clowning on you. Obviously, yes, people have called me that. It's Ryan Theriot plays for the Cubs. College together. He is nicknamed the Ryan. Yeah, there we go. That's my jam. Yeah, that'll happen. So do you guys have any questions about writing headlines or subject lines or any of the stuff I talked about while we're waiting for Mike to get here? Oops. How did I become a copywriter? Well, I was hired to a wedding favor company as a web guy, and then I started doing some SEO, and then the husband of the lady whose wedding favor company it was co-founder of Stompernet, and then I worked there as a web guy, and then volunteered to write some copy when they needed some, and they thought it was good. So I got promoted to chief marketing copywriter, and then I wrote copy every day for 3 years, and then I quit. And then all of 2010, I wrote for Video Boss and for Kajabi and for Link Liberation and for Shoe Money System and Video Conversion Formula. And if none of those matter to you, that's cool too. They were clients. I wrote a lot of copy for people just to prove that I couldn't just do it as a day job. I can do it for independent clients, and now I'm trying to teach people how to write copy the way I write copy, in case that's useful to them, because I sold a bunch of stuff for a bunch of people, and I'd rather make a living now telling people how to do that instead of writing more copy. I can't see what John is drawing, but it looks dirty. Let's see. Bill Farnham asks, Brad Fallon's. Yes, I worked for Brad Fallon's wife's ex-wife's wedding favor company at first, and then when he got together with Andy and started Stompernet, I was doing SEO for the wedding favor company, so I'd sort of go to the Stompernet events to learn the SEO stuff. And then I was just sort of there, like I volunteered to do some blogging, and they liked the way that I wrote, so they gave me that job, and it's awesome because I find writing to be pretty easy and fun to do. No, I didn't sleep with anybody for the job. I just got good at tricking people into buying stuff with words. But they ended up liking it after they bought it, so I don't feel too bad about tricking them on the front end. But they were tricked. I tricked them. All right. Well, I'm going to get off the camera. Hopefully Mike will be here soon. But if anyone wants to jump on and get on the camera, please do.